Let's resume our meeting. Mr. Au Lok Hin has moved an German motion, but he was not speaking on any particular item. So I'll invite him to speak later. Ms. Tanya Chan. Deputy Secretary, we're exploring possibilities here. I know you have your job to do and you have certain objectives to meet, but we are trying our very best at this late stage to find a way out. If we want to recoup certain GFA and within the site constraints, would that be able to do some delineation of the site areas and also through imposing some new conditions of the development and without compromising the step profile, and also while allowing the public use that we have in mind to go forward. I've just heard that underground you have the reserve the site area for North Island 9. Can we have a bigger basement, although we may not increase the building bulk above ground? And also in the plan submitted to the Harbourfront Commission, where there's a car park, the buildings are not as tall. Have you explored these possibilities of going for some more underground space? And have they provided any proposal to the Secretary? Or are you going to only change your mind with this global alert issued? The Chairman, Mr. Lam Siu Lo of the AAB, has said that although this is not yet a building of 50 years of history, it can still be submitted for a grading by the AAB. Would you consider doing this and submit it for grading? Well, I understand the good intention of the member. Why is the demarcation done in a horizontal way instead of the horizontal way? And the building height of 50 on the left side and 16 meters on the right side were already there when the OZP was formulated. We hope that to the right, on the right-hand side, we have more visual permeability because just a row across is the statue square. We hope that the view from the square would be such that the harbourfront is visible. Outside Site 3 and towards Wan Chai, and that is somewhat closer to City Hall, and also site number 4. There will be great open space there. Therefore, we hope that by improving the visibility of the right-hand side of the site, we can improve the open space environment. Also, where the question of whether we can build a bigger basements or bigger space for the basement is a question of cost. If you have to excavate the ground for 5 or 6 stories of basements, it will be quite costly. And we'll deal with the question concerning the letter later. Well, Dr. Kokake is not here. We have spent more than 3 hours here, and 4 hours was spent at the PWSC. Who would like to speak on this item? Please press the button if you want to speak.
Well, someone has pressed the button. I'll read out the names.
好嗱，我讀一讀就係區諾軒。
Ngao Nok Hin, Kokaki, Tanya Chan, Shuka Fai, Claudia Mo, Tony Jia. I'll draw a line there. I'll deal with the adjournment motion later on, and then we'll put the item to the vote. Mr. Au Nok Hin, I am acting in accordance with paragraph 39 of the procedure for the FC in order to propose a suspension of the item. After these rounds of questions, you will see that the administration is withholding information. You have not submitted any paper that you submitted to the Harbourfront Commission and the Town Planning Board to the LegCo. You are wasting our time. Please do not accuse me of wasting time. Number 2, the so-called office floor space and also retail floor space. If you tell me that you can exhaust a figure, and so we have certain office space and certain retail space, then at least we know what to expect. Just now, Mr. Christopher Chung talked about welcoming a new era in the Greater Bay Area. Well, at least you show us the sums. But instead, you tell us in 2016, I did the design and I matched it according to the Hong Kong PSG. But then you don't even have a number. Later on, when the developer gets the piece of land, basically he has a lot of room for maneuver, and whatever we say today will be useless. And your imagination of 2016 will not be realized. Later on, there will be 5 buildings. Whether in 3A or 3B, they will only have 8 stories, including the basement. Let's say Site A will be developed without controversy, but Site B, you are demolishing the GPO building, but you will not be creating too much office space. All along, many democratic members say we just want to preserve the GPO building. And under that major premise, you can still develop underground and you can create office space above ground. That is not asking too much. What is the impact like? Eddie Chu told you that vis-a-vis the Central's development, Site 3 is just one piece of land. If you really want to create office space or shopping malls, you should not be clawing back on office space creation in other projects. And we are now talking about the GPO building, and I think you should do some public consultation. We know that some conservation groups have applied to the AAB to do historic grading of this building, but we still don't have it. And yet today we are talking about whether we should keep the building. I'd like to ask members, do you think these procedures and figures should be supported in a rush? And this is why I am moving the motion under paragraph 39. Okay, members can speak for 3 minutes on the motion. Ms. Tanya Chan, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I know that the letter of Dokulomo has been given to the administration not too long ago, but I am mentioning this organization because it is an international organization under the UNESCO, and which is the most influential and authoritative organization with regard to preservation of historical buildings. When we tried to preserve CGO, at that time, the CE, who was the Secretary for Development, also made a unilateral decision, thinking that that would be turned into commercial use as well. She heard views that certain shopping mall space could be clawed back, but in the end, since China is a signatory, and in the end there was an international warning with regard to the West Wing of CGO, and in the end West Wing was preserved. And civic organizations fought that war for many years. The CE had gone through this, and now this is not at the alert or warning level, but the chairman had issued his aspiration in a letter. as Mr. Au Nok Hin was saying, there was a request for grading at the AAB. You think that his buildings without an age of 50 had not been graded, but in fact there was such incidents, even if it was in a small number. When you did the design, the building was 30-odd years old. Now it's over 40 years. Since an important international organization gave it positive grading, and if the SARG does not treasure this important monument and use this as a starting point to go for innovative building ways, instead if you just pull it down and supply commercial space, it will just be another commercial building, and there will not be any uniqueness. Now we can have the opportunity to preserve a monument, and we can make use of new thinking in order to also provide commercial space by building upon it or next to it. Maybe you can relax the height restriction. As you can see, the buildings around the site are rather tall. Why can't we strike a balance? Mr. Shilka Fai. Thank you, Chairman. I have read literature on the GPO. It's the 4th generation. I have seen pictures where Hong Kong was an international mail center. The GPO was next to the sea. Therefore, the mail could be delivered onto vessels and leave Hong Kong. But after 40 years, we have reclaimed a lot of land from the sea, and very often people now use email. Yes, people still post letters, but I think the volume is shrinking. We want to preserve our post services, but should we still keep it at the central waterfront? I think Hong Kong people will have different views. That is a very central area. And now we are not talking about delivering mail onto vessels. So why should it occupy that space? People talk about conservation, but the building is only 42 years old. If you want to preserve this, what about tenement buildings in Hong Kong? They would all have to be preserved, and there can be no development. The people of Hong Kong will have their own view on conservation. It's just a rectangular building of 42 years. Why do you want to preserve it and delay developments? I don't think that is the expectation of the public. In Kowloon Bay, we now have the headquarters of major government departments already. And if the post office is also there, I think that will be in line with the overall development of Hong Kong. And now we have the post office in Central. I'd like to tell you a story, Chairman. A month ago, we were talking a site at the waterfront of Quarry Bay in the Eastern District Council, and a factory building would be put up there, and councillors cried foul. They said, "What? Are you building a factory next to the waterfront of Quarry Bay?" And in the end, the government proposed to build a lower building for the use of a hotel. By the same token, because of our historical legacy, it had to be fronting the harbor. But today you talk about conservation, and now we also have this adjournment motion. I'd like to remind members, look, in 2016, Mr. Au Nok Hin, we ran for the constituency seat together. You would know how much rent retailers are paying and the shortage of land that is facing them. So why don't we fight for more retail space so shop owners can pay lower rent and benefit the public? So I won't support this adjournment. Chairman, please put this item to the vote because we have a lot more to do. Gary Fan, 3 minutes. Chairman, I speak in support of the adjournment motion because of 3 reasons. Number one, at the PWSC and also at the FC, I said many times that you want to reprovision the GPO because of certain considerations. Mr. Shilka Fai is, of course, most concerned about money, and that is the supply and shortage of Grade A office buildings. He is talking about the international economic environment. And now this change is supported by data. So we should have this suspension, and the administration should reconsider the latest R&V figures with regard to property, and that is in the CBD, in Sheungwan and Central, the rental index for Grade A office buildings. You should review that, and then that would be a prudent way for you to reconsider the project. Do you really want to demolish GPO in order to provide more Grade A office buildings for economic development? Number 2, conservation of historical buildings. Civic organizations and residents support that development direction. For some time in the past, that has been the dialogue with the administration. You had the civic community, green groups, and in fact, we are just asking for a compromise. We say you can preserve the facade and the outer walls, and in fact, you can add to the building to provide commercial space. You can have taller buildings. Why don't you think about it? Number 3, practicality. In Annex 1, the DS said since it will be a terraced development going from south to west, building height would be scaled down. But if you look at 50 meters and 16 meters, and if you just swap them, then you will be able to preserve the GPO building, which has a traditional architecture. It will not prevent you from increasing commercial space. Why don't you go for it? That is the middle of the course way. You can increase commercial development space, and at the same time you can do conservation. Ms. Claudia Mo, 3 minutes. Chairman, I understand we have spent a few hours on the item. That's true, but until this afternoon, we are still seeing new information. Mr. Au Nak Hin was talking about papers submitted to the Harbourfront Commission with plans and design. And Mr. Eddie Chu mentioned that in front of IFC, you did not use all the land, and the officials said Designing Hong Kong and other parties said we should not do it, so you did not do it. The major issue is, as I spoke for the first time at the meeting today, I asked about information and also consultation. So, information and consultation. This is very suspicious. You said 10 years ago, Designing Hong Kong said we should not do it, so you did not do it. But now, if there is a real choice, what if they say yes now? If the land in front of IFC is in such a state, then you might not need to do anything to the GPO building. And if that's the case, people might come up with another proposal. But now, you again mentioned the consultation 10 years ago, and then you said you were discussing with stakeholders. But then 10 years is a long time. 10 years. A lot of change could have taken place. 10 years ago, did you mention the demolition of the Rumsey Street car park? Probably not. And also, the 175 parking spaces at the Star Ferry Pier, you said they would be given back. Okay, you want to reprovision the GPO building. I'm not exactly against it, but On the other hand, can you not give this a second thought about the design in Central? Do you have newer thinking instead of just clocking the time used? It's only this afternoon that I have seen those plans supplied by Mr. Ngau Lok Hin. This is not really fair. Why did you not give us all the information? You said this was mentioned at PWSC, but no. Okay, time is up. Mr. Ray Chan, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I support Mr. Ngau Lok Hin's adjournment motion. After 2 hours of discussion, you will know that most of the Democratic members who spoke wanted to preserve the GPO building, and of course we are reflecting the residents' views. At least, we like real comprehensive consultation instead of saying a definite no. Today, you may have the funding. Tomorrow, you may not be demolishing the GPO building, but you can see that the attitude of the administration is such that after the consultation of 10 years ago and also after they have applied their mind to it, this is put forward as the best option. I think that is not a good attitude. I want to support this suspension motion so that there will be more pressure on the administration to consult the public again. I think it's worth it. And a pro-establishment member said that if that's the case, we would preserve all tenement buildings. But please, how many buildings are there that are like the GPO building? And even professional groups are telling you to reconsider it. You demolish a functional building and it would lead to a lot of waste. I won't repeat that point. Today, Mr. Ngau Lok Hin showed us a paper submitted by the Planning Department to the Harbourfront Commission. If there is an adjournment, I would have more time to read the paper. So I know who is speaking the truth or something near the truth. Ms. Ho said that if the GPO building is preserved, you will not achieve the full commercial space and it will not be effective. I don't know whether you are finding reasons to account for your conclusion, because your conclusion is that you are not going to rethink it. Or is it that you have done feasibility study and you have a few options? I hope to have more time so you can let us know the whole story. Well, yes, I know the motion is going to be voted on, and I know you are not going to demolish the GPO building tomorrow. I hope that anything that is unclear can be addressed by the administration in papers. You don't need to ask for money to demolish the building because I know the developer will be paying for it, but please try to address our doubts and questions. Mr. Eddie Chu, well, actually, I don't know how I'm going to vote, actually, because I like to negotiate a condition with the administration. If the Development Bureau can promise us today that even if the vote is supported, there can still be room for discussion. In other words, you need not create 150,000 square meters of commercial space by dividing up Site 3 into 3 chunks. I would be very happy to rethink my vote. Mr. Ray Chan said that the pro-establishment camp is approaching this debate with a certain attitude. And first of all, whether there is indeed insufficient Grade A space in Central. I already said that the shortage is created by the administration.
Well, he chopped up the parcel, which led to significant loss of floor space, and now that to keep the GPO, that will be a detrimental, which I beg to differ. Like Mr. Andrew Su said, if you keep this building, that means you want to keep everything. That's not true. For 2017-18, whether for some Shui Po, the Garden Factory building, or the Union Church, these post-war architecture have disappeared this year. And on the conservation of post-war architecture, the government's policy is rather outdated and not well thought out. If not through this case, we try to speak out, applying the government's logic. You just put a money tag to it, and there will be no discussion that all the post-war public architecture or private ones, that they wouldn't be protected. So 50 years on, looking back, there's a vacuum for this time period. So this is not a zero-sum game, and we're not trying to overturn the central planning. We just want to talk about whether the planning for Site 3, that after this funding request to have room for amendment and discussion, so that we can have a true balance of development and conservation instead of exaggerating. Next, Mr. Wu-Chi-Wai, 3 minutes. And when we discussed it at PWSC and of today, the government did not ever consider responding to members' questions. Why, when you decide on the reprovisioning of the post office headquarters, would you bundle that with the demolition of the GPO building? So that's the greatest controversy. However, after summer vacation, when we return, when we come back to this project, we haven't seen the government to consider that when it is utterly impossible to decouple them. When you were to demolish the central GPO, there will be reasonable to explain to LegCo that what are your plans, so that we can debate the relevant facts. That's the first point. Second, and the Mansfield land parcel that failed to be auctioned, that will preclude changes in the real estate market. Will that also happen for this GPO site? So the government's handling of these vacant sites is simply waiting for interesting bidders before dealing with the associated issues. Is rather passive approach. The refrain of need to provide the grade 8 offices as repeated in the document, would that actually be realized? Is whether the developers are willing to submit the bid. If so, how you ensure that this grade 8 office site can be released to the market on time? And on the course of development and conservation, I can see back in the 1990s, the Peninsula gave a great example. So they have a 7-story hotel built in 1950s, and they have a new 30 stories building on a north wing for a comprehensive integrated use. So development and countryside and conservation not necessarily at odds with each other. So I support this adjournment motion because I feel the government has a duty to provide a complete answer. Next, Mr. Kwang Chun Yu, 3 minutes. I speak to support this adjournment motion to retract this, and Ms. Ho Diaz may have a very hard time in your explanation that our request is simple. Why couldn't the government conduct another public consultation? The one you did is 10 years ago with no mention of demolishing the GPO. So you're using the findings of a 10-year-old consultation to this and tell us that we can demolish this building. So suppose we support this funding while reprovisioning the Hong Kong Post headquarters, that this land parcel, how can the LegCo have a role in for its oversight in its future use? What's more vexing, that while some claim the Murray building done a good job in other examples, we're not looking at the age of the building. Some colleagues claim it's only 42 years old, but rather how the public perceived this building and this landmark location for a long time, while it's in good, excellent working condition. I first asked, why would it have been so wasteful? How much construction weight be generated? Excluding the basement will generate 11,000 tons of construction weight. This is all waste. Unless you had a presumptive stance that we must demolish it, at least give us more information to achieve a win-win situation. Let's say conserving the we can just extend the life of this GPO building instead of tear it down, and also achieve the aims you set up in your document. Even though the Bureau had just described it, that as long as the GPO is there, we can't develop the site, since the forest space cannot be further lifted. Then the public is not convinced and wanted to conduct the consultation this year. I wouldn't say there were total support for keeping it, but at least this is the opinion will be divided. This is a murky consultation. Yeah, we didn't mention, they only show it in the physical models, and therefore the GPO is not in the drawings, and you're simply just sneaking it in. So we need to move at the times. We need to consider the public will ask questions. There's not enough debate. Whether we pass this or not, well, then the public will ask again when this is implemented in a few years' time. So you should have another consultation based on procedural fairness. Next, Mr. Al-Tin, please reply, 1 minute. Thank you all the members who have spoken, especially Mr. Andrew Hsu. Let's highlight our differences. So you represent the chain stores in your function constituency, while I represent the small medium enterprises. You ask the SMEs in your constituency, how many can afford shops in Central? So speaking of preserving the GPO, at least it can turn it into a bazaars. So this item has been framed a very undesirable way. So for the established camp, do you want a shopping center or a grade A office space? To reprovision this HQ in Kowloon Bay, and to couple that with the demolition of the GPO, that makes it so controversial. If we decouple that, we don't have all this fuss. But next time when we discuss this, I hope that we can stop and think whether we should keep the GPO building. Time's up. I now put this to a vote. This committee decided to adjourn FCR 2018-19 bracket 54. The bell will ring for 5 minutes.
但係大家咧而家係收咗3個37A 㗎，有邊？
We have 337A motion. If anyone would like to submit them, please do so as soon as possible.
So
we're voting on whether to adjourn the debate on this item. Since I already drawn the line, so after the vote, there will be 6 members asking question, and then we have 437A motion, which we will deal with after this. Voting begins. Voting stop. Please show the results. 17 for, 34 against, 0 abstentions. The motion is negatived. And first member to ask another round of question. The result isn't projected on the screen. Do you want to speak? We have 5 minutes. Mr. Andrew Hsu. During the adjournment debate, I already said that I support the government to get on with it and vote on it as soon as possible. Ms. Claudia Mo, 4 minutes. Is that a question? This is the last round. I'd like to ask the administration. Just now, I'm asking about the information and consultation. Since that we have new information, don't you think you should conduct another round of consultation? You claim that 42 years old, and is it worth conservation? The building I live in over 60 years old. Does that mean would definitely be a monument? You have to look at the facade, the design, even engineering quality to see it worth to be preserved. When you're not talking about just conservation, it's talk about your entire mindset. So here you talk about not enough space for a graded office. But every time you're at odds with yourself. On one hand, we have to decentralize our CBDs and to have more presence in East Kowloon or maybe a Lantau. But here, you're exacerbating the density and the commercial appeal of Central. This doesn't make sense. On one hand, you're decentralizing. On the other hand, while concentrating them. So first, would you consider another round of consultation? 2, after we grant the funding request, even for the reprovisioning of the headquarters, that you would consider preserving the GPO building as one of the options. DS. Speaker off mic. Chairman, as for the future of the GPOs in Site 3, we have been listening to the public. However, we have done enough consultation and we have no plan to initiate another round of consultation. You can't just say like this, so you deem it enough as enough and up to them. This is not really an open and responsible government's attitude. Please continue. Well, the government need to make a judgment that when to make up their mind. The government will keep their eyes and ears open. We will continue to liaise it under different panels. However, we have no plans to conduct another public consultation on this site. So it's just decided once and for all. This is simply a matter of take it or leave it. Attitude like these, or the attitude of governance, is simply paternalistic. You pretend to speak nicely, but and really you don't give a damn. This is irresponsible. I find it unacceptable, though. They wouldn't even say considered. They wouldn't waste your breath to persuade you. So decide to strike on one note as once and for all. There will be no consultations. The land planning loaning for Site 3, we already took into account the previous public opinion. That's 10 years ago. Time's up. Next, Mr. Tony Chair, 4 minutes. As like I just said, I support the reprovisioning of the post office headquarters, as they shouldn't be in Central. Take advantage of the reprovisioning. In terms of the mail processing and delivery capacity, the government can do more.
呢啲做傳遞嘅。
We have people who make a lot of money by turning a small courier service into a very big business. And the post office has talked about the provision of service to online shoppers. So maybe more thought should be given to this line of development. And the SAR government has actually proposed the Smart City initiative. So whatever you have not been able to do should be considered further later. And also, according to paragraph 14, the additional recurrent expenditure involved in this exercise is $260,000 for the maintenance of greening, etc. In Tsuen Wan and Cheung Sha Wan, you have some existing postal facilities. Are you going to save anything from their relocation? And in Tsuen Wan and Cheung Sha Wan, you have leased premises, and of course there are also government premises that you are using. By concentrating all these facilities in the new headquarters, what kind of savings can you achieve, or would the vacated premises be put to some other use? Postmaster General, thank you for your reminder, Mr. Chair. In building the new headquarter building, we would consider ways and means to increase the productivity by adoption of technology or investment in technology to enhance our productivity, and also to provide better services in light of market development. As regards after the new headquarters is ready, and it's true to say that we can save on the rental that we are now paying to lease premises. There will be an annual saving of $17 million a year. That will be the savings to be achieved through this avenue. What about the additional recurrent expenditure that you are going to incur additionally? Is it net of the savings that you talk about? We have new facilities there, and also we have some. We are going to incur some additional expenditure on for recurrent operations, some overheads. There will be overhead expenses, and now and then in the future at the new headquarters, and we have calculated sums. And that's the kind of additional expenditure we are talking about. I declare that I'm no longer going to accept 37A motions. I asked whether the government would take the initiative to approach the AAB, Antiquities and Advisory Board, so as to grade the GPO building. The chairman of the AAB has indicated that they would accept applications even though the building is not yet 50 years old. We don't have any plan of this kind at the moment. I think Ms. Chan understands the procedure well. The focus of the AAB is on buildings completed before 1950. Mr. Lam Siu Lo, chairman of the AAB, has said that for school St. Anthony, it was built in 1963. And that's another building built in 1966. It was graded in 2016. So there were cases in the past whereby the buildings with less than 50 years of history were graded. What if then the international alert is issued? How would the government respond to that? Well, I appreciate the comments offered by members on the preservation value of the GPO building, but there are other views saying that both in terms of the architecture or the heritage value, they don't see much in the GPO building. And I believe the AAB will certainly consider any application submitted for the grading of the building. Mr. Au Lok Hin, I just want to get 2 more pieces of information. First, in the eye of the Development Bureau, how do you assess the demand and supply of Grade A offices? Because you never know how many Grade A office buildings are needed in Central. And there are some post-war buildings, as referred to by Ms. Tanya Chen, and I would like to know the conservation policy for them. Or are you just going to demolish any of them or all of them? On the supply of, or the projection of the supply of Grade A offices. The last assessment was done under the 2030 plus study. The consultant adopted some economic model, and the projection was done by referring to the business development in Hong Kong. I have nothing new to add on the question of preserving post-war buildings. The focus of the AAB now is to cater for the needs of preserving buildings completed before 1950. And Mr. Au Lok Hin has accused us of not being forthcoming by not presenting all the papers. Well, for example, he quoted the example of the paper submitted to the Harbourfront Commission. Well, we'll refer to the various documents in the process, but we don't know what benefit can be achieved by making public the Harbourfront Commission paper. But we'll consider making it public because we don't want to be misunderstood about our motive. Section 37A motion, Ms. Claudia Mo, do we need to ring the bell for 5 minutes? Yes. Would you read out your motion, Ms. Mo? Please ring the bell for 5 minutes. In accordance with Finance Committee procedure, paragraph 37A, I move that the committee urges the government to restart the public consultation on the need to demolish the GPO building after the engineering work for the Kowloon Bay project for the new GPO has started.
20分鐘，我哋都冇咁懶喎，開埋啦佢。開啦，都唔好嘥。
Time is precious. I think the next one can be processed in 20 minutes. We should continue. There will still be 20 minutes left.
提一提大家咧，我哋即將表決嘅。
Members, please be reminded that we are going to vote on whether we would deal with this 37A motion.
好啦，現在開始表決。
Let's proceed to vote.
現在停止表決。
Voting is now closed and the voting result is displayed. 17 for and 30 against, no abstentions. I declare that this 37A motion will not be dealt with by the committee. Mr. Gary Chen, I propose that the time for ringing the bell be shortened to 1 minute. So Mr. Chen Hakan proposes that in dealing with further motions in accordance with 37A, the committee will proceed to a vote after the bell has rung for 1 minute. Now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise your hands? Well, please ring the bell for 5 minutes.
提一提大家，我哋而家即將表
Members, please be reminded that the question before us is whether we agree to shorten the time from 5 minutes to 1.
好啦，現在開始，
Please proceed to vote.
現在停止表決。
Voting is now closed and result displayed. 31 for, 14 against, no abstention. I think the question is passed. Next, 37A motion. Mr. Chu Hoi Tik.
Thank you, Chairman. Do we need to ring the bell? The bell will ring for 1 minute. In accordance with para 37A of the procedures, since in the consultation there is no mention of the demolition of the GPO building, and now it is using the consultation as rationale for demolishing the building. This is unreasonable. We ask for another round of consultation in order to show the government's respect for public opinion.
又提一提大家啦，呢個就係
I'll remind members that we are now going to vote on whether we are going to process this motion.
好啦，現在開始表，
Voting will now proceed,
現在停止表決。
and voting shall now be closed. 15 for, 31 against. The committee will not deal with that motion. Next one, no, not him. Do you need the bell? Yes, please. 1 minute. In accordance with para 37A of the procedures for the Finance Committee, I move that. Is the bell being rung? Since the government can use other ways, including provision of commercial space in sites 1 and 2 in Central, this committee requires the administration to consult the public again with regard to the demolition of the GPO building.
好啦，呢個睇大家係咪要同意處理。
This is for members to decide whether you would agree to process this motion under 37A. Will members please proceed to vote? Voting shall now stop, and the result is declared 15 for, 31 against. The committee will not process this motion. The last one under 37A, I will claim a division. Okay, the bell will ring for 1 minute. In accordance with para 37A of the procedures for the FC, I move that the administration should provide the floor space that will be supplied in Site 3B, T4 and T5 with regard to office and retail uses, and also the office space, Grade A office space, that can be provided under different options.
好啦，現在開始表決。
Will members please proceed to vote? Voting shall now stop. The results are 13 for, 33 against, no abstention. We have voted down the processing of this motion. If there are no other questions, I will put paper 54 to the vote. Will those please support the motion? Please raise your hands. Claim a division. The bell will ring for 1 minute. Please ring the bell for 1 minute.
同事開得快咗，由得佢先啦。
有得先啦，大家唔好俾佢住啦。大家等個，因為有
Members. Some members rush to press the button, but please wait until the bell has rung and then you can vote.
大家唔好羊群效應，人哋咁。
Please do not press the button because of the herd instinct. I have told you not to press the button yet.
有跟完如果未曬落，機器故障。
嗱，你大家睇一睇下呢個咧就係個真。
Members, we are now voting on the item for the new post office headquarters in Kowloon Bay. Will members please proceed to vote?
現在停止表決。
Voting shall now stop, and the results are 32 for, 15 against. The proposal is agreed. Then now let us start another item.
而家請官員入嚟啊！
We'll invite the next batch of officials to come in.
呢個項目我係請本委員
This invites members to support the recommendation of the PWSC made at this meeting on the 25th of June 2018, and that is upgrading of part of 399DS, relocation of Sha Tin sewage treatment works to Cavens, site preparation and access tunnel construction to Cat A, and an estimated cost of 2077.5 million in money of the day prices, and also the retention of the remainder of 399DS in category B. In the PWSC spent an hour and 22 minutes on the item, and the supplementary paper has been submitted. I declare that I am an NED of the East Asia Bank. To answer members' questions, we have Mr. Liu and his team, Mr. Liu Chan Sen, Undersecretary of Development. Mr. Ray Chan, well, I think this item is logically similar to the last item. On the face of it, you are asking for $2077.5 million to move the Sha Tin sewage treatment works to a cave-in. But then, the vacated site, how will that be used? And it doesn't end there. Next to the original site, there is some controversial planning, which may go ahead, and that is reclamation in Ma Liu Shui. There are residents who are opposed to Ma Liu Shui reclamation, and they are asking whether there is any causal link between the two. The residents say if we object to Ma Liu Shui reclamation, then we should not support the relocation so that the site will not be vacated, so that there cannot be any synergy with Ma Liu Shui reclamation. Well, I met officials in private, but then I'd like you to answer that first question here at the meeting to explain to the public. You say that the two are quite separate. Whether or not there will be Ma Liu Shui reclamation, you will still want to relocate the plant, and then you will think about how to use the site. But then our question is, if you can't do the relocation, will there be some restriction on the future use of the land? And if you will be successful in relocation, then will the timetable be related to reclamation? I will give you all the time you need to explain things to the public who are particularly concerned about this item because of a possible link with Ma Liu Shui reclamation. Undersec, Chairman, as we said many times, Ma Liu Shui reclamation and this project are not related. in time or in procedure. These two are separate items. If both can be implemented, then of course they can be considered as one. Today we are talking about relocation of the Sha Tin treatment works. Let us concentrate on this item. As for Ma Liu Shui, we are still listening to views, and we are still trying to address the public's concern on transport and also the ratio between public and private housing. We still have no final view. Well, this doesn't help Undersecretary. You are not addressing the concern of residents who are afraid that this relocation will facilitate Ma Liu Shui reclamation. You have not taken the opportunity to answer the question. Let me ask you like this. In the feasibility study for this relocation, in 1.3.2, you say that the consultant says that this report does not look at the cumulative effect. The consultant proposes that Ma Liu Shui reclamation and the cumulative effect of this relocation should be looked into in a more in-depth manner. In recent times, the feasibility of study of Ma Liu Shui reclamation has been completed, but the scope of the study does not include the present site. Can you tell me, will you address 1.3.2 in the feasibility study and consider the two projects together and what the cumulative effect on the environment and transport will be? If you won't do that, will you consider not embarking on Ma Liu Shui reclamation, but only develop the vacated site after relocation, so that Sha Tin will not be subject to cumulative effect, which will be exceeding the capacity of residents? Undersecretary, as to future planning and future projects, well, talking about the relocation here, since we are talking about a time frame of over 10 years, the more detailed plan for this project will be done later. As to whether both should be considered at the same time, well, it depends whether both can go ahead. If both can go ahead, then the planning and engineering studies should be done together. But if only one will go ahead, we will only do the detailed planning and engineering study for that particular project. Well, if you can get the money, you will let this go ahead, right? What about the Ma Liu Shui reclamation project? Chairman, as I said, we are considering views collected during consultation and also the concerns of residents. We need time to look into those. No, not him. Mr. Ray Chan's question is also the crux of the issue here. The CEDD engaged a consultant, and the report was that the site here and the Ma Liu Shui reclamation were taken up together. Therefore, the conclusion of 11,000 housing units would mean that there would be two sites, meaning this vacated site and reclamation. That is why you have 11,000 units. Just now you said that things are still fluid, that the two projects can be regarded separately, that you are still considering members of the public's views. Then what about that consultancy study that you did a few years ago? Is that the premise for the discussion? Is it that we can put aside that consultancy study, that it can be disregarded? Is that the case? Well, then that would be a different premise. You are telling us today that the two are quite separate. However, there is a track record that you like to lump things together. That is also what the consultancy study says. If we allow you to relocate the plant, and then in the end you say you're going to develop the neighboring site together, Number 2, last time, the officials said that the consultation has not confirmed land use. But look at the dates. The 3 stages of public consultation took place from 2012 to 2015. And then in 2013, you completed the relocation feasibility study. And you said that housing could be developed and commercial uses could be allowed, and also GIC uses. During the consultation period, you mentioned certain development directions. You did so many reports, and now you are telling us that there is still flexibility. Why, then, do we need those reports? Is it that at this last hurdle at the FC, you are telling us we can start afresh? Undersecretary, as I said, the 2 items can be handled separately. We did certain studies. Those are technical studies for Ma Liu Shui and also feasibility study of the relocation. Those are independent studies. We need to assume land use in doing the studies, because when we do assessment, we need to know the traffic impact, drainage impact, and also water supply. We need to have certain assumptions before we can do technical assessments. From those 2 feasibility studies, we can see that technically these projects are feasible. But those assumptions don't mean that they must be adopted for the future. If we do a planning and engineering study, there will be consultation, and we'll look at land use at the time. There are many variables. With regard to this project, we are thinking after relocation, the land will be used for housing and GIC uses in the main, and also to improve the promenade. These are the possible uses. And as to the allocation of land, that will have to be considered in the future engineering study. The Typhoon Mangkhut did a lot of negative impact on the Sai Kung sewage treatment works, and sewage flowed into the sea. The Sai Kung one was completed in 1988, and this one 1982. You will go ahead with the studies and then get the funding and relocation. You say it will take 10 years. In the coming 10 years, will you take measures at this treatment works in order to prevent sewage from flowing into the sea when there is a typhoon? Can I defer to the director? Yes, please. On this question by Mr. Au, the Sha Tin sewage treatment works was not damaged to that extent when we had Mangkhut because of the wind direction, and the Sha Tin treatment works was next to the river, and in the next 10 years we will have to see how we can better protect the works if there should be another typhoon. But you need not worry. At least Mangkhut did not damage this treatment works like it did the one in Sai Kung. Next one, Alvin Young. Chairman, I'd like to say very clearly that the Civic Party did not have any particular stance towards the relocation. We are neutral. But then we have this very big worry about its connection with Ma Liu Shui reclamation. So we share the worries expressed by the 2 members, especially with regard to future arrangements. Very often you will say something, but you don't make good your promise. And then you don't enjoy the trust of the public. And now I'd like to say clearly that residents have grave reservations, and I can say that they actually oppose to Ma Liu Shui reclamation. Unless the Undersecretary can tell me on behalf of the administration that definitely that will not be the case. Otherwise, will be extremely difficult for us to support the relocation. This is our very clear stance. So, Chairman, I don't want to take up too much time. Just like to complete that point. Now, unless the Undersecretary can say in front of the camera and tell Ma Liu Shui residents that definitely there will be no reclamation. Now, I'd like you to do that. Can you do that, Undersecretary? Chairman. Well, I'm very clear on this issue. At this particular stage, we will not say for sure that the Ma Liu Shui reclamation project will be cancelled.
發咗立場啊嘛，好啊。
So you expressed your views, and so the supplementary question for Mr. Au is just more technical inquiry. For Shingmun River during Typhoon Mangkhut, what is this? So it's obvious of the scale of damage on the riverbank of Shingmun River during typhoon. So suppose the FC approve the funding and start relocation. Is the Drainage Services Department then in the process, especially it will take about 10 years time. For as similar natural disasters, will the DSD be adequately prepared to inspire confidence in the public? And Mangkhut and Haito last year have taught us a lot of lessons. So after Haito, we have initiated studies. As you know, that the DSC facility is usually by the water side for the discharge and the release of sewage. So our coastal facilities, we could come up with ways to protect ourselves from storms. Like you said, for the Shatin sewage treatment plant, that be included in the study. And for Mangkhut, the scale of damage suffered by Shatin is not as severe as a cyclone treatment plant. So we're quite confident. However, we're still undertaking some study. And for the other coastal facilities, how do we offer better protection? That we hope to enhance them, since we have 67 sewage treatment facilities, which are our important assets. Well, simply put, so for a typhoon similar to Mangkhut, even when you're relocated, some of them already away from the original location, there would no impact. Is that what you mean? So speaking of the Shatin sewage treatment of the relocation into the cavern, so the threat of the storm will be, typhoon will be even smaller. Maybe not didn't put it clear enough. So in the process of relocation, the Shatin treatment plant will still be operating partially. So does that mean that there will not be any impact to the original site? Yes. Now we only have 2 minutes left. I declare the meeting adjourned. We'll see you next week.